on right now and for the past 10 years. And it's very popular to change partners and that sort of a thing. And that hookup culture celebrates freedom and confidence. And, that's what it is. It's like, if you read about it, if you ask someone, why is he or she doing this? It's because, you're a free person and it's about self-reliance. So building up this self-reliance, and that's what's going to happen if you engage in this sort of hookup culture. And, when you say it's about freedom and confidence, who in their right mind will have anything against it, But the problem is freedom is a value not so much as an end in itself. Freedom is valuable only in the measure that draws us toward the good. So whatever is drawing us towards the good, that's a value. So being free, we can say, all right, I'm free. I mean, ask any young person out now, go out and high school, universities, uni students, people who work, it doesn't really matter. It's, I want to do whatever I like. But yet again, you sit in a car and you can't do what you like. There is laws and rules and regulations that are limiting it. But that is understood in terms of limiting my freedom. So I can't drive, 200 k's per hour, and that is limiting my freedom. It's not about safety, and no one thinks about that. It's just limiting my freedom because, and that, there is also one important change that happened in the society. I think in general societies, it started with the French Revolution and the principles of French Revolution that were embedded or embroidered in the American Constitution and the founding fathers of the US, who have started celebrating freedom by itself, as a value by itself. I'm a free man, I can do whatever I like, even though, we're not, especially in America, when they were talking about freedom, they were not considering at all Black people, for example, or, there were still slaves there, and George Washington was a slave owner. And all these founding fathers were slave owners at the time, by the way. So, freedom for whom? Freedom for me, to be what I want to do. Anyways, that's a really huge question mark. For whom is that freedom? However, the change I wanted to mention, in the traditional Western civilization, the governments were always directive. Whereas now the governments are protective, okay? And there is a huge difference there. The directive government is pretty much based on the biblical values, okay? Where you're being directed towards the good, okay? We as a society, as a country, as a government, as a state, whatever, we are being directed towards something that is good for everyone. And so we're directing you to do so, like a parent, like a father, like a mother. I'm not, whereas even now, this has changed totally, where even parents have stopped being directive and they've become very protective of their own children. Whereas, she feels or he feels my 5-year-old or my 10-year-old feels like this. Well, what does a child know what's 300 kilos? Šta zna dijete šta je 300 kila? They're saying this in Serbian, but we've got this expression where that you have to direct your child to brush their teeth. They don't want to brush their teeth, but it's good for them, so you're going to make them do it because it's good for them. If you leave it to them, they're not going to do it ever. And they're going to have to pay for their consequences, and it's going to be a huge price they have to pay for it in each and every way. So you have this responsibility, and the governments were like that before. Now the governments are protected. Okay, you feel like you are a tree. Okay, the government says, that's fine. I think you are a tree, and I'm going to protect you. I'm going to build a wall around you, so no one goes behind that wall and no one is violating your sense of identity. Okay, so no one asks the question now, what's identity? Because the word identity means that something is identical to something else. I feel like a tree, but am I identical? My identity is a tree, but am I identical to a tree? So the question of truth comes. Am I a tree or am I a cat? I can identify myself as a cat, but I'm not identical as a cat. Everything within me, around me, myself screams that I'm not a cat or I'm not a tree or whatever. So, and what the governments are now doing, they're protecting this, they're building this wall around people, communities, and etc. Because freedom is being glorified as a value, that has an end in itself. There is nothing more than freedom. And then freedom means I can do as I like. Whereas it's not like that in the whole history of the Western civilization, which is very much biblical, which, the very foundation is biblical. So freedom is valuable only in the measure that draws us towards the good. So if freedom is not drawing us towards the good, then freedom is not a value. Okay, it's very destructive, becomes destructive. Okay, so I mentioned freedom on one side, and I mentioned self-reliance or confidence. That is also being glorified as two major things in our hookup culture today. So, self-reliance or confidence is good only in the measure that it allows for the fully mature living of the good life. Okay, I'll say this one more. So confidence is good only in the measure that it allows for the fully mature living of the good life. Okay, so self-reliance or confidence needs to lead us also to some other ends in itself. So it's not a value in the same way freedom is not a value in itself. So in other words, the subjective attitude, I have this subjective attitude to hook up, okay, always calls out to objective good, and there it finds its objective point of reference. Okay, in hookups there is no moral or ethical setting, no purpose, and no meaning. Okay, all that matters is that I become free and confident. That's all that it matters. So there is nothing objectively good. There is no moral or ethical settings. There is no purpose. There is absolutely no meaning in it. Okay, and we live in such a world, and we're surrounded by young people who are glorifying hookup culture.
Could you say, besides bodily satisfaction, fleshly pleasure, that's kind of the...
True, yes, but then it goes for those who think more than 5 seconds, besides having this sexual pleasure, this bodily satisfaction, it is also about freedom and confidence. That's what you gain with it. Okay, so yeah. Hookup culture is a subjectivity that has turned to stew in its own juices today. It is a subjectivity that's not connected to anything objectively good and turns turns in on itself. Okay, so left to our own devices, cut off from any key senses of the objective good, we tend to rest in ourselves, in a self-absorbed and finally very, very destructive way. Okay, so I'm gonna try to explain this. So I'm the measure for myself. I decide what I'm gonna be. I decide what I'm gonna wear. I decide what gender I'm gonna be. I make all the decisions. I decide what's the purpose of life. What's the meaning of life? This is all, all of that is up to me to decide. The meaning of life, the purpose of life. It's all about me. So there is nothing before me. All this huge tradition, philosophy, theology, you name it. There is absolutely no way it affects me. It is ultimately me who makes the final decisions. So that's why hookup culture is a subjectivity. So it all depends on me. And that's why it has turned to stew in its own juices. It's a subjectivity that's not connected to anything that's objectively good, and turns in on itself. How it turns in on itself? Well, then I'm left to myself, because I make all the decision. I make what's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life? What gender I'm gonna be? It's all up to me, and there is nothing objective about it. I feel like a cat today. Tomorrow I'm gonna feel like a tree. The day after tomorrow I'm gonna feel like like a penguin. Doesn't really matter. It's all very subjective. But because there is this huge cutoff from any key senses of the objective good, so we tend to rest in ourselves, in a self-absorbed, and finally then that is a destructive way, because human being is made, every sociologist will say, we know that we are communal being. We need others. Another person is like a mirror. I reflect, I find out who I am thanks to you, because you are becoming part of me in a communication relationship that I'm building with you. It's not just that I'm in this very complex process. I'm actually finding myself in a way. Okay. And that's why I said it's a self-absorbed and finally destructive way. And Christian theology calls this ancestral sin. This is what the ancestral sin is, the sin of Adam and Eve. So that's why there is great sadness that comes out of hookups. And if you ask anyone who's been through something like that, it is a great, great sadness. It is sort of an addiction. People who start, who engage in this sort of behavior, it's very hard to give up, because as you said, Gregory, so it is about sexual satisfaction and bodily pleasure. And once you experience this pleasure, you want more, because you've reached this level of satisfaction, but then it causes a great, great sadness. You feel empty because it's self-absorbed way. And that is an ancestral sin, actually, because you feel lonely, you feel empty, and you want to fill this void that you feel after you've experienced this hookup. And you want more. And it's the same thing. It's no more different than being an alcoholic or a smoker or a drug addict or being addicted to anything else. When you're addicted to something, you have this temporary pleasure that you experience, And as soon as you extinguish the cigarette, you feel empty. And what do? You want more. It's the same thing with money, by the way. You earn some money and you say, okay, I've got this, and that. Now I want more. I want more. I want more. But the space there that you're trying to that you're trying to fill in with either pleasure or sex or money or even glory in this world, like fame and being famous or so on, it cannot be filled with any of these. That's why I said that the Christian theology is calling this ancestral sin, because that is ultimately a separation from God. And ultimately, we come to Saint Augustine, who says, and I'm like a parrot anymore because I keep repeating this verse from him because I love it. When he says, "You made us, O Lord, for yourself, and therefore our hearts are restless until they rest in you." So our hearts are restless. Our hearts are like a Google engine. It's not just our hearts, but also our brain. Okay, you go and Google something and you say, oh, let me find, I do this all the time. Let me find what's the etymology of this word. And I find this, oh, really? And I go on and then I Google something else and I Google something else and I keep going, keep going. So we are restless. Our mind is restless. Our heart is restless. We as human beings, we're restless. But this cannot be filled with anything but with God, because we're made by God and we're made for God. So the only satisfaction, the full satisfaction, is only in God. Look, I've got nothing against sex, pleasure, money, fame, but if it starts to dominate our lives, then it's a problem. Then it's a problem. So because then it will turn in on itself. And then if there is no objective good, then I'm going to end up, I'm going to, rest in myself, in my self-absorbed and finally very destructive way. So I guess that's what I wanted to say about hookup culture, and then generally about how I connect this to our Christian theology and to our to our great tradition that has something to say about this as well.
With freedom, it's interesting also that you're only as free as long as you're not exerting your will over someone else. Like,
yeah, it becomes destructive. Yes,
but I mean, the general sort of popular idea of freedom is that it's all individual, but once it goes beyond exerting your will over someone else, then it's sort of, that's like where they cut it off, but they don't say that you don't have freedom. You don't have the freedom to hurt someone else, but you have the freedom to, I guess, hurt yourself.
Yes, because you're responsible for yourself, but then someone else needs to be responsible for the whole society. But then, as I said, the governments have now become not directive as they were up until 100, 200 years ago. They have become very protective. So it means, all right, because this is the concept of freedom that you're just now saying. The ancient concept of freedom is totally different. The ancient concept of freedom is not against something or limiting something. The ancient concept, the biblical concept of freedom, is freedom for. I'm free to do as I like. That's today. Whereas perfect freedom is not. Perfect freedom is what is actually yes. Perfect freedom is not no. Whereas now freedom is always no. So the freedom has a limit. You go drive on the road. There is speed limit. There is this limit. There is that limit. You go to work. You go to school. You got all the limits. something that will limit your freedom. But then the government, you know, you've got that. That's ridiculous what's happening now in schools. That's ridiculous what's happening. And I'm not going to give it the momentum at all. I'm not even going to mention, because I think it's totally stupid and it's going to pass very soon, because everyone is realizing now how stupid it is, where you have, you know, an association in high school of people who identify themselves as you know, a feral, you know, or, you know, as a cat or a dog or some animal, or, you know, not to mention LGBTQ and this and that, which I've got nothing against it. I've really got nothing against it. But we just shouldn't be giving it a momentum. We shouldn't actually pay attention, because ultimately there are so many bigger problems in our society, in our world, that we need to deal with. That this, I believe, is a purpose distraction that has been imposed on us from very artificially, from medias and so on, and that many Christians are actually are hooked up on that. And don't be hooked up on that. That is a distraction from the most important things that are really a problem in the society, in the church, in life, and so on. And we engage ourselves in a totally stupid things. Okay? So just don't give it a momentum. If someone says, if a guy comes to you and says, you know what, I feel like a girl, please don't pay attention to it. If someone says it comes to you and says, I feel like a penguin, just remember that there is 2 women in Australia killed as a consequence of domestic violence. That's the biggest problem. I've just had a police officer here the other week. We're going to our archives, who's, you know, he's not just a police officer. He's in his free time, he's a historian. He's doing something about Anzac Day and this and that. And he's trying to find out something about Serbian Anzacs who started marching back in the 50s. And we've got some people here, because our church is also war memorial church and this and that. And then I asked him, what's the most... why do people call police in most instances? First, 90% domestic violence. Domestic violence.
2 a day, women die? Is that what you were saying?
2 women per week in Australia. 2 women per week in Australia are killed by their partners. Okay, that's a huge, that's an actual problem. You know, this, I was talking to my wife, my wife is a social worker, and they say in sociology, this, you know, he, she, they, them, that's called a non-existing problem. You know, whatever, who cares? Who cares? You know, this is the subjectivity, as I said. It's the same, whatever I said about hookup culture, it's same goes for this. It's just subjectivity that turns on in itself. And there's nothing objectively objective about that. There's nothing objective about that. You know, it already has, and it will turn to stew in its own juices. You just let it go. You just let it go. It will, in the way it came, in the same way it will, and just don't give it the momentum. Just don't give it the momentum, because there are far more serious issues, you know. Because most of the people that feel like they, she, them, whatever, you know, they come from troubled families. That is our problem. Dysfunctional families, dysfunctional society. That's the ultimate problem.
Social contagion, people with the transgender movement.
What's happening?
Social contagion. People getting the idea that they can find fulfillment over
yes.
The numbers are too high for it to be otherwise. It doesn't make any sense.
No, that's true, because people are trying to go above and beyond what they know.
And end up disillusioned, miserable.
Yes. Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. I'm not going to judge, Yeah, I'm not going to judge, but what I see there, it's this, as I said, you know, I quoted Saint Augustine, we're restless and we want to find something above and beyond what we know, what we experience. And you know, that, be it pleasure, be it fame, be it money, doesn't really matter, but you're not going to find total satisfaction. You're not going to find fulfillment in any of these. So I wouldn't lift this up as a, you know, failure more serious than any other sins in the world. What I'm trying to say, according to the biblical tradition, is that's the ancestral sin, and everything comes from there. That we're separated from God, and we inherit this ancestral sin as a child that's born from a drug addict mother. So the child is not guilty, the child is not responsible, but the child is born as a drug addict straight away, you know, and that's what we all are, you know. No one is better in that sense than anyone else. So we, as J.K. Chesterton says, we're all seasick and we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat and we're all seasick. So judging others will get you nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. The moment you start thinking you're better than others, that's why we as Christians, whenever you see some sin around you and you feel the need, you know, momentaneously, you feel the need to judge and to say, oh, this is just a sin and so on. And that at that very moment, you must remember your own sin. That's why the fathers of the church are always saying, and that was in Latin, memento morti, which means remember death, which means remember your own sinfulness, you know, your own sin. And you will not go there and try to judge others. If you hear and say, you know, that the bishop, the patriarch, you know, people whom you expect to be the most perfect and virtuous people, that they've done something horrible, just remember your own sinfulness. Just remember your own, and you say, God will judge everyone and me for my thing, you know. And so, and that is a huge, self-righteousness is a huge problem of the Protestant churches, especially in Australia and America. Self-righteousness, that's right, yes. Self-righteousness is a huge, you know, you try listening to these Protestant preachers and so on. It is very full of self-righteousness, yeah. And you try listening also to some Orthodox, you'll find the same thing, but not as much, I would say. Yes, but let's try not to go there because, and also what I've read some of some article. I can't remember some Protestant theologians said that you know, in previous generation the ultimate sin was pride, which the fathers are saying, you know, the ultimate and the biggest sin is pride. In our generation, he says, and I think he's right, it's sloth. You know what sloth is as a sin? Sloth is being not interested, laziness, not being interested in anything. Like, I'm talking to young people and I say, you know, what do you want to, oh, it doesn't matter. You know, and I try to kind of see, is there some passion, some energy for anything? Do you like this music? Do you like this sport? Do you like this? Oh, well, whatever, doesn't matter. It's really sloth from what I've found. Inertia, that's right. Very inertive, very inertive. And I think that is because of full stomachs. They haven't felt.
Because of what? Sorry, I didn't hear
you. Because I'm trying to translate in from Serbian. Zato što su puni stomaka.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
because the glass is pouring out from the glass. You know, they live in
Yeah.
abundance. They live in abundance.
Yeah, they really do these days.
And not and that's the responsibility of parents. I mean, don't get me wrong. Every parent is doing their absolute best. And everyone thinks that they do the best possible things for their children. But it's called in Serbian medveđa usluga. I don't know how they say it. It's not really a favor when you're giving everything to your children. That's one thing. The other thing is then what we have, you know, as I mentioned just before, domestic violence. Very dysfunctional families where, you know, violence is there every day. That's a huge problem. And then, I mean, Dana would know better because you know how the brain tries to protect itself, and people, you know, try to forget these you know, people child's brain.
Yeah.
They suppress that because because they can't deal with it, they would go nuts. They would just burst out. They would go crazy, and the brain just puts it somewhere at the back and just closes that and doesn't think about it, and you use distractions and this and that, and hence, you know, all the vices that we. I'm going too far. Anyways, far and wide, and I'm tackling things that I'm not really expert in. Yes.
So that, can I just bring it back to the topic, because I was thinking about the topic of what was it, healthy dating and relationships?
Yes.
And having a teenage son now, I guess just kind of thinking in my own mind about what is the, I guess, the Orthodox, I don't know, the Orthodox way around introducing relationships or encouraging relationships in our young people. I mentioned to you before, my son goes to a Christian school, so I know they've had certain conversations, but that's also very, that it's an evangelical Christian school, right? So I've got to be mindful. I mean, I don't know what the differences are, and I'd be curious as to what would be the Orthodox Church's kind of guidance around healthy relationships for youth.
Well, as I said, there is something that's objectively good, as I said before, and objectively good, it means that I don't consider the other person as the subject, as an object in a way. So that means another person can never be an object that I'm going to use in order to fulfill my desires. You know, I have this desire, sexual desire, pleasure, and this and that. So you always have to have this notion present that this other person is a world, a planet, a universe for itself, and that it takes time to get to know this other person, and to love that person. You know, love is a gift. You know, it's a great English word where we have, you know, fallen in love. I'm falling in love, which means I am falling. Falling means I lose myself. There is no egotism there. It's a beautiful thing. But it's only in English. It's not in Serbian. Now I'm admiring English here because it is, I'm losing myself and I'm giving myself to you. So the priority is you. It's not me. The priority is not me fulfilling my own desires and wants and wishes, but you. I want to be there for you. Therefore, this is falling in love. And I'm falling, I'm losing myself. So if you try to explain to your kids like that, that's great, because then I don't know, hoping, I've got a teenager as well. She's about to turn 17, as been Branka commented. I'll probably have to get a shotgun.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just praying, and I think prayer really helps there. Because everything you want to say to your kid, you can try doing that, but they're not listening. It's just they're just not going to listen. They're in that age when they know everything. Teenagers, as they are, they know everything much better than you do. We're all stupid and old, and that kind of thing. So no, they're not listening to us, but God is listening, I believe. And therefore, whatever you have got to say to your teenager, say to God in your prayers, and God will find a way to pass the message somehow in His own mysterious way. So God has the way. But yes, what we can, there are things that we can do, and that means attention. I can't overemphasize the importance of the word attention. In the Orthodox liturgy, we always say, let us be attentive, or wisdom, let us attend, let us attend, let us attend, attention, attention, attention. Before the reading of any scripture, the priest says, let us attend, attention. To have this attention. I've been talking to psychologists, and they say attention is more than 50% of human person. And that means listening, being attentive. So you can be blind, you don't have to see, you don't have to touch, but you have to open up your listening ears to be able to have this attention. So, and that means, and everything in this world seeks attention. This flower seeks attention. If you don't give attention to this flower, it's gonna disappear. Your dog, your pet. That's why pets are important in life for your kids. You're teaching them to give attention to something outside of themselves, to not be self-absorbent. And that's why it's important to also kind of try to pass the message, but then also you got to let go at some point. Like, you got to let go. Until you let go, your kid will not start walking by itself. You remember when they were 1 year old or whatever, when they started walking, you want to give all the attention, you want to hold them and so on, and you want to help, but no, they got to start walking by themselves. They got to walk the walk. And as long as you're holding them by their hands, they're not going to walk. You got to let go. And they have to fall, and they have to learn on their own mistakes. I mean, in a way. I mean, we don't want them to do that, but that's why I think prayer is important, because God will teach them in a way. It's very helpful if they go to church. It's very helpful if they read the Bible. It's very helpful if they pray, because all of this has this educational purpose. The disciples of Jesus are called disciples, which means students, and Jesus is called the teacher, So first and foremost, Jesus is a teacher. So he's teaching us something. And when a teacher is teaching, you got to listen. That's why, hence all the explanation about attention is how important attention is. Because the teacher is teaching you, but you're not listening. You're not attentive. You're not there. So if we have that, and you meet a person, your son Dana meets a girl, the most important thing, please be attentive. Look at the girl, listen to this girl or boy, and pay attention to everything. If that makes sense. I mean, that's what I would say, but no one listens to me. It's true.
Well, we tune in every week to listen to you. So someone's listening.
No. That's yeah. But I'm talking about my kids.
But they'll listen eventually. They do get there, I promise.
I don't know. I'll see. I'm there, so I'll know more in about 5 years' time, hopefully.
No, just sorry to burst your bubble. It'll take a little bit longer than 5 years, just so you know.
Yeah. Well, I was the other day, there is a Jewish tradition, because the other day I was reading some again, Protestant theologian, but he did the research in old Judaism. It was considered that you can't even touch the book of Prophet Isaiah until you turn 50. So yeah, because you got to be mature enough to understand all these things. So yeah, it takes time to understand things. Take it easy.
Yeah, age, experience, everything.
Yeah. Not by itself, you got to keep yourself busy and try to learn all the time.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can say about like marriage, how it I guess what its purpose is, or the way it leads you to God, or
Oh yes, that's my favorite. Okay. My favorite is okay. All right. For everything, I know the first page of the Bible, for everything that God creates, he says, let it be, let it be, let it be. Let there be a firmament, let there be water, let the dry land appear, let the earth bring forth, let there be light. Everything God says, let it be, let it be, let it be. When it comes to creating of human beings, it's a project. He starts speaking in singular, in plural now. He says, let us, he doesn't say let it be, he says, let us create. Okay? Let us create human being in our image, according to our likeness. And then he said, let them have dominion over the fish, blah, blah, blah. And then the next verse. So this is chapter 1, book of Genesis, the first chapter of the Bible, verse 27. So it says, so God created human beings. In the image of God, he made him. Male and female, he made them. Okay? So there is something about humanity that implies both male and female. Male and female, he created them. Because this biblical verse would not just say, it could just end up with saying, in the image of God, he made him. That's it. But then it continues, male and female, he created them. Okay? So this is very important. It's a project. It's a project, and it's unfinished. Human being, it's not like the earth, the firmament, the stars, the heaven, everything. As I said, I'm repeating myself, but I want you to understand this. Let it be, let it be, let it be for everything except for human beings, which are a project. It is a process in the making. Okay? That's the first chapter of the book of Genesis. It's proven by fathers of the church, many theologians, that when John writes his gospel, it reflects and mimics the book of Genesis. So, as you know, you've all read the book of Genesis, at least the first verse, and you know that the book of Genesis starts with the words. With what words does the book of Genesis start? The first page, in the beginning. How is the Gospel of John starting? With what words? In the beginning as well. The Gospel of John is reflecting also the book of Genesis. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning, and so on. All right? The Gospel of John the Gospel of John, when it comes to crucifixion, in the synoptic Gospels, and the synoptic Gospels are Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the last words of Jesus in the synoptic Gospels are forgive them, Father, for they do not what they do. But the last words of Jesus in the Gospel of John, and they reflect, as I said, Gospel of John reflects the book of Genesis. Please remember this. The last words of Jesus are, it is finished. What is finished? The human being. The human being is now finished in Jesus Christ, crucified on the cross. Okay? This is how the book of Genesis is finishing. The book of Genesis is not historical book. Okay? It is not it is an eschatological book. Because when God is creating human beings, God is taking the dust of the ground. Okay, is that right? Do you remember that? And so God, the Lord God. Do you want me to read this for you? Do you remember that? When God takes the dust of the earth? Yes.
Breathe into it.
Yes,
breathe
that's
into
right.
it.
Yes. Then God formed man out of the dust from the ground and breathed in his face and the breath of life. And the man became a living soul, right, out of the ground. Who of you is made out of dust? Who's made out of dust? No one. Who's going to become dust?
All of us.
All of us. This is talking about our future, not talking about our past. That's why, remember, Jesus on the cross, crucified, dying, voluntarily dying. It is finished. There on the cross. Why is the cross on the grave? One of the reasons that the cross is on the grave. This is finished. It's finished. Now we're finished. When we die, we're finished. Because now God is gonna take that and he's going to resurrect us and he's going to transform us. Okay? Now we're going to become fully human. All right? Apostle Paul says, I'm going to try to remember because I wasn't prepared for this, but Apostle Paul says that Jesus was not now you know that, but I was telling that before. If you were to live in Galilee in the 1st century and you see Jesus, would you say this is the image of God? You know, the perfect image of God? Because Apostle Paul says that Jesus is the perfect image of God. And the book of Genesis says that we as humans are, God made human being. In the image of God, he made him. Male and female, he made them. Male and female, he made them. In the image of God we're made. Apostle Paul says that Jesus Christ was recognized as the perfect image of God, not when he was walking on the streets of Galilee, but when he was crucified on the cross. Now, Jesus crucified on the cross says it is finished. Human being is finished. Male and female have something to do with the image of God. And Jesus and the cross has something to do with the image of God. Only Jesus crucified on the cross, Apostle Paul says, he was recognized as the perfect image of God. Him crucified on the cross. Him crucified on the cross. And male and female. What is happening in a marriage? What is a perfect sacrifice in the Christian church? It's martyrdom. Martyrs, those who give their lives for Christ. For most of us, This is actually happening in marriage. We are being crucified for each other. I crucified myself, and my wife crucifies herself. So we are united together on that cross. Okay? That is the ultimate meaning of marriage. It is a martyrdom. Most of us experience martyrdom in marriage. Okay? And that is precisely where this perfect image of God is being recognized on the cross. Jesus being crucified, male and female, he made them. So God has made human being in the image of God. Male and female, he made them. Where do we see that Jesus is the perfect image of God? On the cross. On the cross, not when he was walking. And male and female, where are they crucified for each other? In marriage. In marriage. That is our way to being perfect. Because Jesus on the cross says, it is finished. How we are being perfected is in the marriage. For most of us, if we're not monastics, okay? If we don't decide to live in monastery and so on. It is the sacrifice. It is the sacrifice of marriage. Does that make sense now? I'm really trying to does it?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Sorry. Any questions? Oh yes, so I've got the, yeah. Does it make sense?
Yeah, of course.
I'm thinking like, if God only made man, if God only made a single, just male, I guess, or combination of the two or something. But if you just made male, I guess I feel like, yeah, that man would lack in some way. He would only be able to gain through having a spouse. That makes sense. It's hard to put into words, but it's kind of a.
I don't understand.
Like, I'm just imagining if God didn't make them male and female, he just made them male. For this man to be alone, kind of like, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it's just like a feeling, like yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, it's just an incompleteness or something.
Yeah. I mean, that is even physically, we know that we have this attraction towards the opposite gender. Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
I had this analogy. It's kind of simplistic, but it made a lot of sense to me. It was like, say, the man and woman are here, right? God is here. As the man and woman both draw nearer to God, they become closer. Like if God's here and they're going up like that, so they get closer together as they both draw near to God.
Yeah, if God is the center, then that's how it's supposed to be. If it's not, then it's a struggle anyways. I'm not gonna, because I know people who are not really believers, but they have a good marriage and they have a good life. So I can't be, and then on the other side, I know people who are Christians and claim to be Christian, have a horrible marriage. So
It's not totally done.
it is not. It is actually to what you actually do, not what actually you believe, because we as Christians should be first and foremost living the truths that we, that you've heard. So that's yeah. Yeah, I will just say, I just remember this. As you know, what says in the Bible is a man will leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. Even though historically, as you know, this usually it was the woman who leaves her house and goes to her husband. But it's interesting how the Bible says a man will leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. And also Apostle Paul says, and that is also very, something to note. He says that there is neither male nor female in Christ. Okay, so don't overemphasize this difference between the genders. Apostle Paul says, there is no slave or free man, there is no Jew or Greek, there is no even male or female in Christ, but only one. We're all one in Christ. So, and furthermore, in the Orthodox Church, as you know, monasticism is sometimes considered the perfect way of Christian life. So, sometimes we ask ourselves, what do we make out of all of this? Yeah. So, as I said, Apostle Paul says there is neither Jew nor Greek, neither slave nor free, but also there is neither male and female, for all are one in Christ Jesus. So, yeah. I wanted, yeah.
Would monasticism be considered, well, I guess that doesn't really work. I was gonna say, because a marriage can become like a conciliar thing, like within itself, and not really extend outwards to other people.
But monasticism by itself means monasticism, like means by itself, like alone, and yeah. Just let me read to you this passage that I mentioned from Apostle Paul, Colossians chapter 1 in verse 15 and onwards. He says, the Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rules or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. So, so the image of God, the image who is Christ himself. Christ is the image of God, and Adam is in the image of God. Okay, so there is a difference. Christ is the image of God, and Adam is made in the image of God. So what I mentioned before, male and female, he created them. So this is typically related to procreation, but if you read only Genesis 1, that has not yet happened in terms of the poem of Genesis 1. In that verse, God says to other animals, be fruitful and multiply, but other animals are not called male and female. Do you remember that? Other animals are not called male and female in the Bible, in the book of Genesis. All right. They're just, God does say to them to be fruitful and multiply. So does this mean that there is something more to male and female than simply multiply? I believe it does. I believe it does. Later on in the story of Noah, animals will also be called male and female, but just in terms of Genesis, they're not actually. The way these two are structured puts these two things in parallel. So in the image and male and female, as I said to you before. I'm just reading my notes. I just from earlier and from Father John Beer that I value so much, and this is not originally me, but I think it's just fantastic. So so there isn't male and female elements in God. You have to know that. Like Christ is male and the Holy Spirit is female. That's just ridiculous. Because those are some ideas as well that are just stupid. So now where is he said to be the image? And I said that in Colossians 1:15. And sometimes that's identified as a hymn that was sang in the church. It's called the hymn about the crucified one. So one on the cross is in the image of God. It's just Jesus in general. So if laying down your life on the cross in the act of love means to be the image, does that give us an insight what male and female is about? I'll say that again. If laying down your life on the cross in the act of love means to be the image, does that give us some sort of an insight what male and female is about? Do you understand? It is martyrdom. It is martyrdom. Jesus laying down his life in the act of love on the cross, and in that act of self-sacrifice, he is called that he is the image of God. And male and female, it's about that. It's about martyrdom. Male and female is this horizon in which most of us learn how to lay down our life for one another in the act of love. You fall in love and you say, this person's happiness is more important than mine. Okay? They become one, yes, but that is, I need to fall so that this union happens. I need to die to myself. Yes, yes. As Jesus has died for the humanity on the cross. Yes. Does that make sense? I think this is deep.
Yeah.
Explains a lot, really, I think. If you know this, many more things will be much clearer to you, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
Thank you. For someone that wasn't prepared, you did all right.
Oh, we said so many things. Come on.
Yeah.
All right.
Job well done.
All right, guys. Well, see you. Whoever is coming tomorrow, we have a service. Who's not coming, then we see you on Saturday. Sunday. Monday is the Transfiguration, Preobraženje, beautiful feast day. So yes, I look forward to all of these coming. And tomorrow we start the Dormition fast. So we are fasting from tomorrow for 2 weeks. No meat, no eggs, no dairy for 2 weeks. Let's prepare for the Dormition of the Virgin Mary. All right.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.